Hi, I'm Mike from Gluten-free Ireland, and in today's challenge video I'm going to hopefully produce a gluten-free pie and chips. So thanks to Ian Taylor on Facebook for his suggestion. The two things which are probably the most common requests that I've seen on Facebook and Twitter are pastry and bread. I think those are probably the two hardest things to make, so thanks Ian. We're going to follow a fairly standard sort of recipe for pastry, but I have some additional hints and tips from my mum, Tina. You'll see her on the social media as well, and you can chat to her. But we have some steak here, and then we have the very basic ingredients for pastry, including gluten-free flour, which is only real difference in ingredients, and the fact that apparently it's a little harder to work with. So I'm going to try it. I'm also going to use a food processor for the mixing rather than do it by hand, simply because it keeps it cooler than working it with your hands, and apparently it's a lot quicker and easier, but I don't bake, so I've never used it. My wife is the baker, and she produces fantastic things with this. I will either produce something mostly edible or burn the house down, so we're going to try it and see. First thing I'm going to do is pop the steak back in the fridge for now and get ready with our pastry. You might hear some gurgling in the background. That's my little chef helper, Lucy, who's with me today. So first thing we're going to do is get our pastry ready. Okay, we have all our ingredients ready for the pastry, and our steak is kept chilled in the fridge. Just to run through the ingredients, they're all listed below the video and on the website anyway, but we have 500 grams of plain flour, and this is gluten-free. This just happens to be Dove's plain gluten-free flour. We have 165 grams of butter. So the normal recipe that I've seen normally has about 250 grams of plain butter, but in this case we're substituting a third of it for lard or cooking vegetable oil or vegetable fat. So this is cooking. There's no particular preference on brands, it's just the ones that were easily available. One of those top tips from my mum was apparently substituting the third butter for cooking or vegetable fat. It makes your pastry a lot better. It works a lot better with the gluten-free flour. So again, there's 165 grams of butter and 85 grams of lard. With a bit of salt, just a pinch, and then 8 or 9 tablespoons of water. So that keeps things fairly simple. And the first thing to do is to mix it or sift your flour into the mixing bowl. So I'm just going to use the bowl from our mixer here. We need 500 grams of flour. You'll quickly realise this is not one of those stylish cooking shows where I have made the dish 3 or 4 times and produced something magnificent, and I know exactly how it will turn out. It's not really going to work that way. I'm going to try it, see how it goes. I haven't made one before, so it could be fantastic, it could be raging hideous, but either way you'll see it happen. Okay, so you just have a few little hard bits left at the end. Put those to one side. Okay, now we need to rub in the butter, so we need our 165 grams of butter. And 85 grams of vegetable fat. Well, that's our 85 grams of vegetable fat. Now it's simply a case of rubbing it in together to produce a breadcrumb-like finish. So again, you can do this with the machine. I'm told it's a K beater that goes on this one. I'm going to use a dough hook for the actual pastry itself, but just to get the breadcrumb texture, I'm going to rub it in by hand. And it's just a case of really working it all together until you get a breadcrumb-like texture. Okay, so we have our breadcrumbs pretty much ready to go. Basically, it's a fine crumb sort of mix that's a bit so it's a lot thicker than the flour, but it's a bit more crumbly. You can squeeze it and actually pretty much form a lump or a shape with it, which is quite nice. But as soon as you crumble it between your fingers, it'll just fall away. And it's just a case of going through and making sure there's no lumps of butter or fat left there. It doesn't really specify just exactly how precise you need to be in terms of those breadcrumbs. I mean, I've gone through it here probably for 10-15 minutes just to really work it through and make sure there's no lumps in it. But it looks pretty good, and it certainly is a fine sort of crumb. So we'll try that and see how it goes. Now we just stir in our water. Again, it's one of those magnificent pieces of instruction, 8 or 9 tablespoons of water. It doesn't really say what consistency to aim for, so we're just going to try it and see how it comes out. Ultimately we're forming it into a ball that we can work with, so 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just going to work that in a bit, so try and keep it even in terms of the mix. I don't know if it makes a lot of difference. You may be able to just pour it in, but try it this way and see. Certainly hasn't made a lot of difference. 5, 6, 7, 8. It into a dough, so we'll put it into the cake mixer. It's definitely starting to gather a bit more, so it's starting to clump together. But that's 8 tablespoons anyway, so we'll try that. We'll give it a run through the mixer and see how it goes, and if it's looking a bit dry, we can always add one more in. So that's it this time. We have options from 1 to max. So we sort it out slowly, see how that goes. And then we build it up. But basically it's a mix until it stops cracking, so we can see how it builds over time. Okay. It's starting to form. At the same time it's also caking, just landing in big clumps around the sides, so I'm just going to scrape it in a bit more, but yeah, it's definitely become a proper sticky sort of dough. But yeah, it's definitely becoming much more malleable. Turn it over a little, see how that goes. It's kind of working. It is largely just pressing it onto the sides. But if I lift it out, you can see that it is quickly forming into a malleable ball of proper dough-like material. So tempted to keep working it certainly, because it is definitely still cracking. It's nowhere near ready, but at the same time our dough hook is just pressing it onto the sides mostly. So form it in the ball again and see what it does. Okay. A horrible fear that it's starting to form cheese rather than a dough, but I was also tempted to add a bit more water, thinking that it might potentially be a little bit dry, and that's why it wasn't forming a ball. But at the same time, when I lift it out, it's quite sticky. it's definitely feels a bit wetter, and it's certainly much more. You know, it feels damp. You know, it feels squishy, and you can see it. You know, it's certainly dents in it, but it does stick like a wet sort of natural ball of dough. Whether that's good or bad, I just don't know at this stage. So the dilemma is whether we keep mixing. And for all you baking aficionados who are now looking at the video going, you idiot, keep mixing or stop mixing. It's easy when you know how. So we could give it a little bit longer and see if it forms. That said, it's pretty sticky now. And when I work it a little bit here, it's cracking, but at the same time, it's not really falling apart or anything. So I'll try it for another couple minutes just to see if, well, really just see what happens, to see if it forms a dough ball that doesn't squish or doesn't have any kind of break marks in it. So this could be awesome. Again, it could be hideous. We're going to try it and see. Okay, yes, it's definitely continuing to form a much more cheese-like substance. Becoming thicker and wetter, if that's possible, without adding any extra water. It seems becoming stickier and stickier. So I think at this stage, rather than risk destroying it completely, we'll make a quick phone call to somebody who knows much more about baking, and that would be my mum, to see what she thinks via the sink. Hello, it's only me. How's you? Good. Just a quick question about pastry. Well, it's not runny or anything, but it's just as much more. No, it's not holding together the same anymore. But when if you hold it out, your hands will stick to it. It'll stick. It would be a wee bit warm now, but they've only been in the mixer. I didn't do it by hand. That'll do. Thank you. Okay. Right. That'll do that. Thank you. See you there. Bye. Okay. Apparently it will form up, because it's gluten-free dough. It is a little stickier. Maybe not this sticky, but it is probably recoverable. Apparently having water in the recipe is a little unusual. That was the recipe I had. But if we take it out now, the advice is take it out, wrap it in the cling film as we would normally, pop it in the fridge to chill, to cool it down. It could be it's too warm, and that's why it's making it extra sticky. So we'll cool it down, and when we bring it out, we'll roll it out and knead it by hand with lots of extra dough. Apparently that's the way to go. So next step is cling film, and we'll pop it in the fridge. Yeah, it's definitely gone past the forming up into a ball stage, into the sticky batter stage pretty much. Looks a bit more like a dry cupcake batter than anything. But we will try and see how we get on with that. Pop that in the fridge for 30 minutes, and while that's chilling, we'll get on to our steak. So our pastry is in chilling, so we're just going to prepare the beef while that's cooling. We have our beef to one side. Another nice point on the recipe was to grease a large pie dish. That's about an 8-inch pie dish or so. I have a couple of different size ones. I'm not entirely sure what constitutes large. I'm going by the amount of meat that I have, so hopefully diced up that will make a well-filled pie. But just to prepare the meat, I'm just going to roughly chop it into small sort of bite-sized chunks. I'll leave out any of the really much heavier fat pieces as well. You could cook the fat in. It depends on yourself what you like. But in this case, because it's in a pie, you don't really have the choice of once you've got the pie of making it easy to slice off. So I would prefer to remove it now. That said, we can leave it in the pan for juices and flavour to come out, but not actually transfer it into the pie itself. So, as I said, just going to roughly slice this up. We're just going to add it in to brown the meat all over. So we're not looking to cook it through, just want to brown it off. As I said, I'm just going to put the 2 pieces of fat in for flavour. You can season the meat with salt, but it also asks for a liquid that you put in. So a gluten-free beer was the recommended one. I'm not using gluten-free beer, I'm using a stock. So it's an Irish stock cube, so it's gluten-free. I've just made 150 ml of beef stock, but because of the salt content in stock cubes, I'm not going to add any extra. I'm just going to add a little pepper and some thyme. Our meat's well browned. We'll just let the juices and the herbs and the pepper mix in together now. Just bring this to the boil. I'm just going to add some more of the gluten-free flour to thicken up the sauce. So we don't want it soaking into our pastry. Once the sauce is thickened up, you can take it off the heat and just leave it to cool. We'll have a check on our pastry and grease our pie dish. Okay, we have our pastry back from the fridge. Just going to take it out and see that it has changed much or at all. See how it looks. It's definitely cold enough, and it's much softer. It's not as sticky as it was, so we might be okay. There's definitely a slight stick to it, so it's not completely dry, but it's not cracking when I press it down. It looks pretty good. So we're just going to roll another layer of cling film over it, and then we can roll it out. And with my little pie dish here, I've just run some butter around it to coat top and bottom so that it doesn't stick. Okay. Now, basically we just need a round for our pie dish plus a lid. So it's looking okay. It doesn't look like it's cracking too much. It doesn't look like it's cracking really at all, so it looks pretty good. So we know it's ready. We don't need to flour it any extra. What I'm going to do is just take a chunk of it off here, about a third. Yeah, that'll be a little bit sticky, but it's okay. Just going to take a third of it off here, and we'll keep that for our lid. This might be a little bit much for our size of pie dish, but we'll just use as much as we need. Keep the rest for another pie. So, we need enough to cover the dish and up the sides. So, I'm going to aim for about 5 millimeters. Or not sure what that is in inches. Small, thin, but thick enough to hopefully work with. If we compare that against our dish, not bad. Rather than try and lift it and fold it in, I'm just going to plonk it in there, see how we go. Doesn't look too bad. Hopefully it'll, with the butter, it'll slide down inside and not require too much working on my part. It is very soft as a pastry, so, but certainly it's nice and thick. And I could have rolled it out a bit thinner, but it looks okay. Certainly it is sticking to the side of the dish now, so if I try to lift it away at all, you can see it pulling and tearing. So I would say don't work with it, or work with it as little as possible. And just curve those over the edges there. Just take a knife and take that off. Okay, now we can clearly see the edges. I'm just going to run around again and just trim it pretty flat. It's a very, very soft dough. Even with gluten-free biscuits and things I've made before, which were a much shorter crust. It wasn't a pie by any means, but you could definitely work with it a lot more than this. This is a very, very soft material. I'll say very, very thick in places here, so hopefully it'll work. I just need to make a lid for that. So we've pretty much got a fairly good chunk that we've peeled off again there. So I'm going to use that along with a little bit of more of the we took off a few minutes ago. As you can see it curling up there, so it's definitely getting stickier. The longer it's in the air and the more it's worked. So hopefully work fairly quickly here. Not too thick, try and get it a bit thinner this time, see if we, rather than, I don't want to risk trapping the steam in completely. And we'll cut a hole in the top anyway, but if all the moisture, all the steam is really trapped or really held in there, it would make for a very soggy pie. So. That's getting pretty close. Looks okay. Yep. Doesn't look too bad. So we just need our filling. We can pop that in. This is our cooled filling. Don't forget to leave out the big chunks of fat. So I think with the 8-inch pie dish we could definitely have gone slightly bigger. Certainly for the amount of pastry we could go bigger. I've cut down the meat slightly here, so yeah, definitely you could go for a 10-inch dish, maybe slightly bigger again, but certainly 8-inch is a bit small. Okay, that looks good. Now just roll our lid on here. Okay, where it's a bit thin, it is torn slightly. This is okay on the top. For presentation wise, not good. For letting the steam out, perfect. So hopefully, just a wee bit more there. That's okay. Now, just gonna go around and normally this is where I would just making a bread or something, I would just crimp it by pressing it down, but quite sticky, and very soft. So I'm not sure that it creates a great finish. Again, I'm just going to run around with the knife and see if we can tidy up a bit. Okay. There we go. So again, just going to run around and make sure we've got a nice tight seal. Again, it's grand if the steam comes out the top, but if it comes out the sides, what will happen is it bubbles, or the juice bubbles out the sides, and you get a break in it there, and the fine dull dribbles out to one side, and you'll start to lose sauce, which is your flavour. Not to mention the fact that it'll be quite sticky and it'll stick to the bottom of your oven and burn, and you end up with a very hard, crispy, smelly bit and a burnt bit in your oven. So again, just to cut a quick hole in the top here. To let our steam out. You could probably be creative at this stage and make nice shapes or a hole or some kind of decorative gap. I'm just cutting across it. Okay, and that is it is what it is. That is pretty much our finished pie. The last thing I'm going to do is just glaze it. Just a wash of egg yolk over it, just to make it go golden and crispy. It is quite a delicate pastry. Again, that could be the over mixing initially with the beater has made it a bit more sticky and brittle. Could be the water content. It could just be the way the pastry is, but ultimately we'll know from the baking. So it goes in for 45 minutes in a 200-degree oven, which I believe is gas mark 6. So that's our pastry well coated. That's our pie ready to go. And just pop it in the oven. So I'm just going to pop it on the middle shelf. In the middle at 200 degrees for 45 minutes. And we'll come back and see how it does. Okay, so we've popped our pie out of the oven after 45 minutes, and it looks okay. It hasn't cracked too badly. There's a few little hairline cracks here and there, but otherwise it looks grand, and it's pulled in away from the edges. Nothing's bubbled over or exploded at the sides, so it's looking pretty good. You may also have seen from the time-lapse video a few chips sneaking in underneath the pie halfway through for 20 minutes, but we'll come back to those shortly. You can cheat, as I've done for this evening. I just used McCain chips. You have a look around. Some of the brands don't have flour added to them. They're just potato and sometimes sunflower oil. So those are great. Other chips do have a coating of flour on them, so you just need to be careful. But that's if you just want straight out of the packet handy chips. If you want proper traditional chips, we'll do that next. But for now, just have a look at the pie. It is very, very crumbly. Now, this is the thin topping, but it is falling apart. So let's see if we can dig down the sides. Now it has pulled away from the sides, so it's not stuck, which is nice. I mean, it wasn't overly laden with butter, but we'll lift it out here if we can. See how it looks. Messy is how it looks at the moment. Getting the first slice out is always the tricky part. That, and it's pretty well filled with the meat side of things as well. So, in terms of presentation, scores I think are low. that said, if we take that one away, we try for a second slice where we've got a bit more room to maneuver. Again, it is very crumbly, pretty much like a biscuit, almost. So get a spoon underneath here. That looks a lot better. A little bit left there. So it will not be gracing the cover of any food magazines anytime soon, but it is effectively a gluten-free pastry, gluten-free beef pie. First thing I'm going to do is check and see how it tastes. It's not bad. It is a little bit dry. Yeah, it is definitely, compared to regular pastry, it is definitely dry. With the meat, it's nice. The meat cooked through, comes apart easily. I'll try a thick bit of the crust here. Yeah, it is short, it is very crumbly. Yeah, definitely crumbles. So it's pretty good. Flavor wise, it's a little bit dry. With the meat and the juices, it's okay. But even though we put it into the pie dish quite thick, it has come out okay. I thought it would be dewy in places. It's definitely not dewy. So it's crumbly, but taste wise, it's pretty good. It is a little awkward to work with on the plate, being crumbly, but it's not bad.